Okay, we are incredibly delighted this evening to have a special guest presenter, one who is going to talk about economics, a subject which we really don't talk about anywhere near as much as we probably should. And I'll introduce, Jael will introduce John in just a moment. So, back to this slide, just to remind you, I do want to mention this. This is our new logo. You've probably been familiar with the logo that looks like the one on the wall there for so long. But Daniel, being a bit of a graphic designer, thought we should update our logo after 12 years. And so this is what we have come up with, which we rather like. So now I'm going to introduce in a moment Jael, who will introduce John. But I wanted to give you a quick update on the agenda. The presentation will be by John Giordanengo. We'll have a Q&A, and then, as usual, during these sessions, we'll finish up with a 10 to 15 minute discussion of the things that SOCAN is doing and the things that other climate activist groups in the area are doing. Before we get to Jael introducing John, I should share with you our land acknowledgement. We are advised that it is inappropriate for somebody who is not approved by the Native American tribes. It's not appropriate for somebody who is not approved to actually read this. And so I'll leave it there for you to read. It's 3 slides long, and I'll read it so I get a sense of how long it's going to take you to read it. But not out loud. Okay, thank you very much. What we conventionally do in these meetings, and we will do it again today, is ask you a question and ask you to have a conversation with somebody sitting near you, preferably somebody you don't know, but if that's difficult, that's okay. What are some ways you pursue sustainability in your life? And identify somebody sitting near you, as I said, preferably someone you don't know. Introduce yourself and share your thoughts, and what you get is 1 minute each way. And I'll try and time this. Okay, so off you go.
For a person who's beyond sustainability and aspiration, recognizing that the systems that we have are not sustainable as they are, evolve so fast to sustain the standards, and we actually have to deal with this.
Okay, could you change sides and have the conversation the other way? Okay, thank you very much. It's always harder to stop people talking sometimes than to get them started. Okay, if we could regroup, please. One of the delightful factors that comes up when we are doing these programs is sometimes one of our activists actually knows somebody who does something really interesting, and that's exactly the situation we're in today. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Jael Dragomir, and Jael gave me a long bio, so I'm not going to go through her long bio because that would eat into John's talk. But if you get a chance to talk to Jael, here's the question to ask her. Where have you taught at the college level, and particularly what's it like teaching in Kathmandu? So Jael.
All right. I am so pleased that you guys are here tonight. And I'm so pleased that... Closer? Wow, I'm getting a lot of... I could hear myself. I'll put earplugs in. I've already heard this. Okay, so I met John, I think, 3 years ago at SOU. And one of my students came up and said, you've got to go listen to this man, because she didn't even pronounce his name, didn't even try. And she said, you've got to go listen to him. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll go. And come to find out, he's from Colorado, and I'm from Wyoming. And the student didn't show up, but I had a great time, and John and I became friends. And, you know, I want to paint a picture for you, that out on the Wyoming prairie, on the high plains, John could stand out there and just look across the pasture and point out the plants, point out the different grasses, point out whatever species was living there that had 4 legs or two. And I realized I'm standing beside somebody who really is of this earth, really of this earth. And we became good friends, and I feel very privileged. I could tell you so much about John, but the one thing I do want to tell you is this is a really good book to read, and there are a few on the back table to buy. That is the first edition. The second edition comes out in April. But one of the things that stirred in my head, and I hope I can find it again, I was just telling Rich, his brother, about this, but one of the things that is in here that struck me, because John is going to do this for us. He's going to give us words to speak to people, to cross that divide on political issues, for healing our economy, our ecology, and our communities. And this one particular, I'm going to have to put my glasses on, so pause. Talk to your neighbors. Okay. Humanity is not the center of the universe, and humans are not the center of the economy. Let that set in for a minute. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, we know we're not the center of the universe. We know that already. Are we the center of the economy and all that we've messed up? John's going to tell us. So without further ado, John?
What's up? Okay. Let's see if the clicker works. All right, we'll see what happens here. Okay. It's not showing up here. It's showing up there, though. All right, give us 1 second here. So I don't even know what happened to the cursor here. Is it? Oh, okay, you know what? It's not showing up on this. Yeah. It's my glasses. Are there any computer experts in the room? Yeah, I'm not getting a cursor on the screen. So.
Turn around and look and then use it that way.
Yeah, but I can't advance.
Could you point it at the projector?
Let's see. Yeah, it's doing nothing. We'll figure it out. In the meantime, I'll talk about this slide, and I'm going to admit something. I ripped off half of this title. It's not mine. It's from Alan Greenspan. If any of you remember who that is, Alan Greenspan was a Federal Reserve chair under 4 presidents. But not just any 4 presidents. He was a Federal Reserve chair under the blossoming of global market capitalism as we know it. So this perspective under which the United States took the reins of something the world has never seen before. And from that experience, he wrote this book at the onset of the Great Recession called The Age of Turbulence. How many of you feel that? This turbulence we're going through right now? It's not just me? Really? How are we doing here? Are we there yet with this? Or should we keep introducing?
Up arrow or the right or left arrow.
Yeah, it's not liking that. Oh, maybe a Control-Alt-Delete. No? Where's the nuclear button? So while we're doing that, yeah, let's see. What are some of the issues you're concerned with? What's the type of turbulence you're feeling right now? Anybody want to share? What's evidence of this turbulence? Besides the technological. Yes. Anything else? Who wants to share? Turbulence. Yeah.
Artificial idiocy.
What's that?
Artificial idiocy.
Artificial idiocy. Yeah. How about you?
Unsustainable funding or like unfair funding mechanisms to create change.
Okay. Where are we going to get the resources to change? Yeah. What level? How much of it's local? How much it's global? Okay. That's a good one. I haven't thought about that. Any other turbulence? Certainly.
The upcoming issues with clean water.
Clean water. Yeah. So, and you're lucky here in Oregon and Colorado, we have some real big threats with the quantity of water and how clean it might be in the future. That's a big one. Without water, there's no life. What else? While we're killing time. Yeah.
I'm feeling a lot of turbulence around the definition of work.
How should we define work?
That's the question. I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
Autocracy turning our society retrograde.
Autocracy. Retrograde. My brother and I were discussing on the way down here. We went to Applegate Valley. We came back through Grants Pass. We're circling around and talking about this order of decision making and autonomy. At what level, what is the natural geography of humans? We talk about this, like the scale at which we feel whole. Where our decisions matter, and where we feel connected to our communities. Where does that take place? I don't know if that's what you're getting at. No? Any other disturbance? Turbulence? Yeah.
I know here in Oregon, one of the big issues and kind of a real hot button is the Oregon wildfire map. And everybody is what's going to happen, insurance companies, there's a lot of questions being asked.
Yes. We've had equally bad fires in Colorado, really bad here. That is a side of turbulence that is a feedback loop to management decisions in some cases. In Colorado, where we have suppressed fire for so long, that we've actually caused some challenges in how we're going to experience fires and floods and droughts in the future because of how we've managed forests in the past. It's a feedback loop that I think it's a rebalancing, but will cause a lot of challenge and difficulties. How are we doing there?
We got a lot of cooks in the kitchen now.
Yep.
Hey.
This PowerPoint is open multiple times, and so it's advancing on one but not the other. I'm going to close some of these iterations of PowerPoint. We'll get
Great.
it fixed.
We have an expert. All righty, saving the day. A couple last thoughts on turbulence, disturbance, things can be challenging in this century. Yeah.
I don't know how appropriate it is to say what I'm thinking.
Oh my gosh.
Then you better quit.
Well, that's an issue.
say.
Idiots at the helm.
I'm sorry?
Idiots at the helm.
At the helm. At maybe multiple levels, right? And how far does this go back? If you look at the history of economics in the world, a lot of politicians going back to before the Industrial Revolution were beholden to forces beyond the political governance. And convince them to do things that we're, I think, experiencing the ripple effect of today. So yeah, no, that's a good one.
You're kinder than I am.
Am I? Okay.
Let me ask you as an educator, how do you educate people that are not paying attention to your channel?
Okay, that's a tough one.
Get beyond the bubbles.
I think it begins with dialogue like this. I think that one of the tricks I have, and you might laugh at me, you might shoot me out of the room, we won't even start. But my biggest trick is very simple. I don't listen to the national news. It's pretty simple, right?
Okay, then we think we have it.
Do we have it? Okay.
We think.
Enough dog and showing. What's that, dog and pony show? Okay, so you didn't kick me out, so maybe some other people are thinking about these great distractions we're faced with every day and how that might be a prevention from us having a more meaningful dialogue. I don't know, we'll think about that. But we'll get going because I think we're already behind schedule.
Can I ask you, what are you listening to?
I try to listen to what we are concerned with as a community, shared knowledge, data, ask questions that aren't being asked, seek answers to those questions, and try to find truth beyond the distractions. I don't know what you call that. All right, so I know we do have a schedule, and Kathy has already warned me she will keep this schedule. So here we go. I believe this is our 21st century challenge to build an economy capable of meeting our needs without jeopardizing the needs of others or the health of the ecosystems we rely upon. And some of you are laughing because you're like, you know, this has been our challenge last century too. We just didn't know it at the time because we were too busy building the greatest economy that the world has ever seen. Or have we, right? So we're going to poke a little bit of fun at the United States because I like to do that because it's our job, right, to push what we believe to be true. And I think we can summarize this hopefully in 3 things, and one of them is in search of root causes. Okay? What is really at the root of some of these challenges that we struggle with every day? What is the structure of a sustainable economy? And I'm going to redefine sustainability in a very simple way. And then, if we understand that, this process of restoration. Just like, has anyone restored a house from mold damage, fire damage, just from being old? It's great to have something you want to do. Restoration is the process of getting there. Okay, so it's an action that we can all take part in. So restoration is something different. So 3 things. Can we get it? We'll figure out. Figure out if we beat the race, Kathy's clock, to finish on time. Chronic symptoms. I think all of us, turbulence aside, have at least this list, some things we're concerned with. And you probably have other things, but there's 2 things I wanted to point out. And one of these will feel uncomfortable. Probably both of them. One of them is we've made minimal to 0 progress in CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere since we have begun trying. This isn't my data. This is from Dr. Kevin Gurney from Northern Arizona University. He's a climate scientist. And he came to give a talk at CSU. He's actually a friend, so I know him well. 0 to minimal progress. The other one is economic. It's that productivity has actually been stagnant since the 1970s in the United States. So we've made all those decisions for the good of our economy, and it has done us no good economically, right? Something else is going on. These are symptoms. This idea of externalities is having a negative impact, often, in an area where something's being produced that someone there did not anticipate. They didn't want that impact. Every decision we make, everything we consume, has this externality beyond where we purchased it. And many of these are externalities. So GDP, this is where we get to poke fun at the United States. GDP is what?
Gross domestic.
Wow. I thought you told me nobody here talked about economics. You said that. It is the value of all goods and services in a time period, a year in the United States. You can do it for Oregon, you can do it for this county. In the United States, our gross domestic product was about $29 trillion in 2024. That's huge. It's the best in the world in aggregate. But have you heard of this term? GEP. You haven't, because I made that up. This is a gross exaggeration of productivity. Okay? We can have fun with economics. So when we look at the amount of energy consumed to support our GDP, and we do it per capita, per person, we get a different number from the United States. And I have data for 72 countries. And at the end, I want you to think about this. We're going to see what America's rank is compared to some other countries. 72 countries. Are we still number one? But why is population and energy important? Because we can increase GDP just by adding people. We've grown as a population in the United States. More people means more consumers. We can grow in productivity just by adding fossil fuels to our economy. We can fake it, in other words, right? So we'll see. I want you to guess, out of 72 countries for which I have data, where do we sit? What are the root causes? We're not making economic progress. CO2 and all these other externalities and concerns, these symptoms, we don't seem to be making progress. And I don't find despair in that. I find hope in this, just so you know where I'm coming from. These are opportunities for us to figure out how to make progress. It's always been my charge ever since youth. I don't know why, but I always want to know why. What's the root cause? Otherwise, we're wasting our time. What is it? Capitalism, the growing wealth gap. Is it greed? Greed has been afflicting humans since the time we were swinging from trees, right? Is it something else? So I always feel uncomfortable saying this to a group of conservationists, as a conservationist myself, as an ecologist. When I think about all the isms in the world, feudalism, communism, socialism, communism, did I say that already? There's a bunch of them, capitalism. And when I think about the equivalent function in an ecosystem, when I think about the free interactions of species in a tropical rainforest that lead to the efficiency and the productivity and the resilience of that forest over time, and I think about the isms, awkwardly to me, one of them rises to the top of the list as most closely mirroring the free interactions of species in an ecosystem. And oddly, it's capitalism. That's awkward, right? It's very awkward, but I want you to think differently about this. And I'm not saying that I'm right, but it's essential in our minds to separate out isms from the structure of our economy. Those two things are absolutely different. Because if we have any ism, any global structure, operating at the wrong scale, we have seen similar atrocities throughout history. And if we allow ourselves, and I'm not saying that I'm right, that I'm pushing us to be distracted by things, we may not get to the root cause. So as someone who's much smarter than me in economics from MIT had this to say about it. Economics is failing because we don't know what the structure of the system is. So that's it. I think root causes, if you don't know what the structure of the system is, we can't repair it, right? So we're going to do a little experiment here. Are you all willing to help me out with something? If you have a heart concern or something, don't do this. Are you ready? I'd like you to take a deep breath. We're going to hold our breath. Take a deep breath. Ready? Close your eyes. Okay, everybody. Now imagine someone walked into the room and they tried to convince you that you are not a keep your eyes closed, deep breath. You're not a self-regulating being. You don't need to breathe. Now 10 seconds goes by and you're convinced, this person's right, I don't need to breathe. Another 10 seconds goes by and we realize our cells, they're starving for oxygen and they're producing CO2, they need to emit that somehow. But I've overridden this really basic thing. As human beings, our cells must be lively, we must have oxygen so we can roam around and find water and food. procreate, form communities, and thrive as an individual. Who is still holding their breath? Impressive. Okay, you can let go now. Now, who wants to describe what happened once you exhale? What was the next thing that happened to your body? You start taking deep breaths, right? It's this feedback loop. The body has natural feedback loops. This defines what a self-regulating entity is. And lo and behold, we form populations. And we know a lot about our bodies, so much that we can do open heart surgery, we can pioneer a novel vaccine to a new virus. We can grow organs on another mammal, a pig, and transplant those, whether that's right or wrong, it's not up to me, but we can do it and transplant those back into human bodies. We learn from others right, that have a similar structure to us. But there's an issue. When multiple species form communities and multiple communities coalesce and they form ecosystems, our knowledge of the structure of the system breaks down. And so we've lacked this knowledge. But we do see increasing complexity. And so this was a question in business school in the early 90s that for whatever reason popped into my mind was, do we have a similar structure in our economies where we have businesses that they live in this nested fashion? Humans form businesses, businesses form industries, industries form sectors, and sectors form our economies. In our economies, they function at a similar level of complexity as our ecosystem, so that what we might learn from one, we should be able to apply it to understanding how to restore or improve the health of the others. And as J.L. was saying, our economies have grown so complex that it could be that the restoration and care of our economies is essential to protecting and restoring and ensuring the health of our ecosystems globally, and vice versa. So this blob here, this has been my passion for 30 years. It's earned me tons of money. Yes, it's so much money thinking about this. This blob is, what are those foundational components, like the organs of your body that must be interacting?
May I have your attention, please? Library will be closing in 30 minutes. Restrooms will be closing in 15 minutes.
Okay. I thought she was going to say what the components were. I was like, oh, well, that's cool. Beat me to it. And I see operating similarly in ecosystems and economies, diversity, energy, and trade. And this is squishy, isn't it? Because we can't really touch these things. You know, we can touch your organs. Now, we hope we don't, because that means something went really wrong. But we could, they're physical. But think about it. An economy or an ecosystem is so complex. It exists far beyond each individual that comprises it. So we could imagine that these governing or these foundational components, they're not physical, okay? But we need to know this. So diversity, we're going to talk a little bit about diversity, energy, and trade, and so what? I don't believe that's the important information. I think it's how these components, how they interact to maintain the health of the system, and the things that we have not been managing in a way that benefits our ecosystems, our economies, or everybody within. So big drivers of change, right? And these are the things in systems thinking that we must know if we are going to have any influence on the outcomes. Where do we spend our time? Where have we spent our time over the past 60 years in sustainability and conservation and environmental protection? We've been spending it on context. We have the social, environmental, and industrial contexts. And you're familiar with the pillars of sustainability. It sounds like those. And they interact, these three things. What is a social context? Our cultural values, religious beliefs, forms of governance, what we think about what a job is, or how much we should work. Right? All these things are cultural or social context. Environmental context is obvious, and industrial context has to do with the history of our cities, the interconnectedness of urban and rural areas, right? The quality of technology, all these things. And they interact to form a very unique economic context everywhere on Earth. What you experience here, and you feel this as human beings, your social, environmental, industrial context here in Southern Oregon is like nowhere else in the entire planet, right? This is true in ecosystems as well. Italian culture has this really regional focus to it, regionalismo. They don't like waste. They love to craft and produce things. But lo and behold, Italy has 20 regions, and within each region, in these nested provinces, and you can find people very bound to the land and their communities in Italy. It's a wonderful model in a lot of ways. So I have an article that came out, it's open access. If you're curious, kind of the process I went through to identify foundational components, that's something you like to geek out on, there's more information in there or in the book. But we're gonna just talk about these three. We're gonna breeze over diversity very quickly because on Monday, I was invited to Bloomsbury Book in Ashland solely to do a deep dive into this idea of diversity. And we're going to talk about ecological diversity and business diversity. But I will mention one thing right now. When we're counting diversity in an ecosystem, what are we counting? I know that Alan knows this. Oh my gosh, number of species. Boom, really, really intelligent crowd. Awesome, we're counting the number of species. So if you are here at the library and you draw a 1 mile radius around the library, you count every single species you encounter. That will be the richness of this area. Okay, trick question. In our economies, when we're counting diversity, what are we counting? The basic unit of diversity, what is it? No, not dollars.
Number of companies.
Whoa! Did you read the book already? You're a speed reader. The number of businesses, okay? So economists actually do quantify diversity. And so this will be the deep dive. It turns out it's trickier than this. There are 7 forms of diversity, and I love this subject. So a whole chapter on that, and that's not even enough. And Monday, it's going to be a fun deep dive into diversity. But so what? Why the heck, why do we even care about diversity? I wouldn't care, and we shouldn't care, except for there are these benefits of diversity in our economies. We could ask this as a challenge to ourselves. If indeed our ecosystems and our economies are homologous, same structures, we should see things like diversity operating in similar ways. So lo and behold, these benefits of diversity, the data that is out there, albeit it's not perfect because we don't measure diversity well, but we see the same things. We have this increased resistance and resilience, this idea of stability in the ecological and economics data when we measure diversity. When we think about turbulence, in the century of turbulence, resistance and resilience to disturbance is important. Now this is another one, higher net productivity and even higher gross productivity just with greater diversity. That's amazing. Higher wages, employment, and profitability with diversity. We see this in some industries like agriculture, which some of you might be happy to know. But a more even distribution of biomass or wealth is another one. We're going to look at perhaps what might be the ecological explanation, the wealth gap, is tied to diversity losses later. And one of them for which there is no data is this, greater human fulfillment. Zero data out there, but I think all of us can agree that a single function economy, one industry or one business in Medford, to use a gross exaggeration, would be a horrible way for us to find fulfillment for a great diversity of human beings in Medford. So diversity, because I think we can just intuitively understand, even if there's zero data, that diversity provides a greater number of opportunities for great diversity. All right, but here's another one that's more relevant to perhaps your mission as an organization, that a diverse economy or a diverse ecosystem uses energy more efficiently. This is Doc. What is this map? What are we looking at? Sorry? Heat. It's a heat map. Photosynthetically active radiation. And it's greatest at the equator, and it dwindles as we get more or less towards the poles, right? And so this is one place to start where we have these limits of what life can produce. But we're going to throw another map on top here of the United States. That is this. We're going to look at precipitation, we're going to look at soils. This is a map of ecoregions of the United States. We're going to get a little bit more specific. We'll look at Oregon, and where we are right now, we are in the Klamath Mountains ecoregion, number 78 across the country. More specifically than that, we are in the Rogue, Illinois valleys, 78A. It is easier to give it numbers and letters. Very specific context here. And in this area, this is what's going on. The more diversity we have, why is this diverse plant community more productive than if we were to have a single species? Why is that?
It's up to die out and more resilient.
But why is it more productive? This great diversity of species here. If it was just one monoculture of dandelions.
Because there's a exchange of resources
Between what?
between plants and animals, between energy and sugar and.
Okay. So greater exchange of resources. Someone else had a hand up. Thank you. Yes.
It feeds different insect populations.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is good because actually the greater diversity of plant biomass actually has not just a greater diversity of insect populations, but a greater biomass of insects in a diverse meadow. But from simply the plant standpoint, the more diversity you have a greater diversity of root systems interacting, you have a greater diversity of leaf angles, you have different plants that optimize production in the spring, and those are different than ones that optimize production in the summer, and those are different than the plants that optimize production in the fall. And some plants will be more productive this year than the ones next year, if you have a drought next year. So there's diversity in this 1 acre with a very fixed amount of resources. Just that diversity allows the system to operate more efficiently, to use that limited energy to produce more. And of course, it's more resilient and resistant to disturbance. So we're going to talk about energy. I'll be curious, maybe afterwards, please come up or raise an opinion now if this is a way that you've spoken about energy in the past. Because I don't see this in the literature, and it's one of those duh things that, well, why don't we talk about this? And that's this, 2 different forms of energy. Energy that's generated within the system. There's a word for that in science called endogenous, generated from within. And there's some examples of that, such as biofuels, wind or solar power, human power, that sustained here by the energy here, and it's consumed here to support, in this case, our economies. Now we contrast endogenous with another term, which is we're transferring it in, and what would that other term be? Exogenous. Nice. Smart. So now this is getting a little bit crunchy, perhaps. Fossil fuels is obvious, right? Fossil fuels were created millions of years ago by ecosystems that don't even exist anymore. We pump them out of the ground, and we put them into our economies. So ancient, extinct ecosystem transferred into our economies, and what do we do with it? We transfer those to other economies. It's exogenous like 3 times over. It's crazy. So fossil fuels are an example, but this is where it gets crunchy. Wind or solar generated in Illinois, transferred to Colorado, is exogenous to Colorado. Okay? Bonneville, on the Columbia River, transferred to southern Oregon, maybe technically exogenous to Oregon. And we should always ask, to southern Oregon, we should always ask the question, who gives a damn? You guys like to drop the F-bomb, I've noticed around here. I can't do that as a speaker, but you can replace damn with some other, it's in your mind if you want, but who gives a damn? Except for this, what happens when we transfer energy into an ecosystem? What happens to diversity? It's not intuitive. So if you don't answer correctly, I don't care.
Change the balance.
What happens to diversity? Does diversity go up or does it go down?
Down.
It goes down. Now this isn't based on my data. I was involved in one of these studies actually in graduate school in Colorado in Shortgrass Prairie in 1997. But there's about 180 studies around the globe in many, many, many different contexts that when you transfer energy into the system, diversity goes down. Tropical systems, tallgrass prairie, shortgrass prairie, alpine systems. Now, nitrogen, which is an energy metabolite, is the proxy for that. And that's what's been used in a lot of these studies. But in systems thinking, we look to other systems to learn about our own. It turns out we don't have a lot of data in economics about tracking diversity relative to energy inputs. So I've gathered the data I can, going back as far as I can, to ask a similar question. Do we see these patterns? Like we see the diversity patterns and benefits across ecosystems and economies. Do we see a similar, at least a pattern in our economies where we transfer energy, do we see a decline in economic diversity, the number of businesses? So this is a graph you may have seen, which is total energy consumption or use in the United States since the Industrial Revolution. And the total graph, the top of the blue line there, is going up just about exponentially. The green, we got some nuclear in there. At the bottom, we got to see that. And some of that green is renewables. So what? Well, we're going to take a look at northeastern Nebraska, which is a highly diverse economy in rural northeastern Nebraska, where my wife is from. And used to have tremendous diversity in that economy in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. And the mill there, the Oakdale grain mill, was an important value add for the region. Their diverse economy built a remarkable set of schools and churches and very strong community bands, etc., thriving community until about 1930. We're going to track this a little bit. So the next nearest community of Neely had a bigger mill, and that worked for a while to provide some value add until about 1950, and that went extinct. Now, on an economic pilgrimage through the Midwest during COVID, I came across Salina, Kansas, in this giant grain mill, and many of you see these around, right? And finally, we had this mill perhaps large enough to handle enough grain to provide some value add for farmers in the Midwest, until I showed up. I didn't do it. I'm sure I did, but it's just coincidence. So it went extinct in 2019. There's a pattern here, and since 1900, we have lost 300,000 bakeries, 700,000 manufacturers relative to the number of people, 5 million farms. So now I will admit, in the honesty of science, this is a correlation. It cannot prove cause and effect, right? We don't have that data. But in systems thinking, one of the things that we do is we look for patterns across homologous systems, right? And so how does this work in rhesus monkeys? Oh, we could use that as a vaccine for our human bodies, and that's how we learn. And sometimes it takes science time to catch up. So this is a proposal. And I think she's agreeing. It sounds like she's saying, yep, I get that, thank you very much. But yeah, so this great economic extinction event right under our noses over the past century with this exogenous energy transfer into our economies, 5 million farms. Those don't matter. No, we don't need to eat. We're not self-regulating beings. Whoa, that's awesome. Wow. You know, it is awesome. It's amazing, the trade in this country, right? It is phenomenal. It's really, really remarkable. So there's 2 trade rules, I would call them primeval rules, under which life evolved on this planet over 1.5 billion years that dictate, I believe, our lives today. And the first one's pretty simple. You've probably seen this before. Some of you have taught ecology. And that's at the bottom, we have this profusion of plants, right? That photosynthetically active radiation, sucking up all that energy with wonderfully healthy soils provided by fungi, decomposing detritus continuously. We got dung beetles recycling that, and this is hugely productive. And as we move up the pyramid, we have these primary consumers like insects feeding on the vegetation, secondary consumers like frogs and others eating those insects. And as we go up the pyramid, we get to these final top predators at the top, and we're losing energy and biomass along the way. But here's a remarkable thing. The study in 2018 to ask the question, where is the biomass in the system? Over 99% of the biomass is on the bottom. That productivity. That is mind-blowing to me. A small fraction of 1% actually makes it to the top. So, and this idea of a balanced or a sustainable trade pyramid might say, and there's 3 forms of trade that economists have paid attention to since the time of Adam Smith at the founding of our country in 1776, our domestic economy, which is within the United States of America, foreign trade, which is across national boundaries, and this boring thing called the carry trade, which I don't really care about, which is asset-backed securities and that kind of stuff that fuels global markets. But this idea of this balanced trade pyramid, Adam Smith, our founding fathers, some of them, John Maynard Keynes, have backed this up to say at the bottom are these extractive renewable energy and recycling industries. They didn't say recycling. That's my answer. manufacturing, construction, and there's a transfer of resources that goes up. And Adam Smith had this to say about this, that the carrying and foreign trades, they are a reflection, they're not a cause of the wealth of a nation. So we see similar thoughts, philosophies bubbling up in our economies over time, and the more we understand these trade rules, the more we might actually be more serious about how we manage trade in this country. But here's where we are, right? With this great economic extinction event, we have more, not a pyramid, a stable pyramid, but a balloon. And at the top, we have much more carrying and foreign trade. 82% of our GDP as a nation is IT, government, retail, services, etc. 10% is manufacturing relative to GDP. What's at the very bottom? Flavia?
Extraction?
Close. Yes, you're right.
Agriculture?
Agriculture. Less than 1% agriculture. This is completely upside down the trade rules of the United States, of nature. But there's another trade rule. Here we are in Oregon again. We have these ecoregions. And another trade rule is that we're looking at the Blue Mountains area. Who's been there? Blue Mountains. There are aspen in the Blue Mountains, correct? Okay. The farther away we get from a center of production in the Blue Mountains, the less likely we are to find evidence of that production elsewhere. Okay, step by step, you're not going to find it. The system is 99% endogenous. Now, some of you, I know you know why now. Why is it that we are not going to find evidence of production for the Blue Mountains as we walk closer towards Colorado? Why is that? Because 99% of production is in plants, fungi, and bacteria, and nematodes and worms, which don't migrate very far, okay? From a biological, a biomass standpoint, we're not likely to find that on an annual basis. It stays there. So where are we in the United States? I love this. How much do you think we import? Of the quantity of things as a country, the quantity of the total things that you buy, what percentage of those is imported?
60.
60? Who said that? 60%.
Really?
Whoa. That's my guess based on some economics data. Some people think it's higher. I can't tell you if that's 100% accurate. I'd be lying to you otherwise. But it's high, right? 60%. But now here's the more important thing. As we get to Oregon, does that percentage go up or does it go down? How much are we importing to Oregon? Think about it. Total imports to Oregon, including other states. Add on top of the federal, it goes up, right? Because Oregon is importing from China and everywhere else, but it's also importing from Colorado and other states, so it goes up. As we get to this county, does it go up again? It goes up again. When we get to Medford, does it go up again? When we get to your neighborhood and your house, does it go up again? It does. So this is opposite the trade pattern, right? These primeval rules of trade in this world of how much we've evolved under catastrophic change over the years. It's pretty awesome that we're that far upside down. So what? I want to wrap this up a little bit. How are we doing on time, Kathy? Where's the hook? Well, she left, so I guess she can
Go ahead.
Okay. So this is Oakdale, Nebraska. This looks like a shining green sea of monoculture corn, as far as you can see. And there is a sustainability advocate from Harvard who had this to say. He said that conventional agriculture is better because it uses low-impact precision techniques that require less land, less energy, and fewer chemicals than before the Green Revolution. And so we should have more of it because to feed these people, we need more agriculture that is efficient per acre. But you can make the same argument that precision armament kills fewer people, so we should wage more war. It's not a good argument. But more importantly, we do like to joke about these things. More importantly, 2 billion people suffer from moderate to severe food insecurity today. Do you know what the population of the world was before the Green Revolution?
3 billion.
Decades. About 2 billion people, actually. So we have just as many people suffering from moderate to severe food insecurity now than before the Green Revolution. Crops now tend to be lower nutrient density and lower nutrient diversity than before modern Green Revolution agriculture. So yes, we're getting a lot of empty calories, and that's how some of these studies become justified as based on empty calories, not in actual nutrition. We're not self-regulating beings. Many countries suffering from food insecurity are net exporters of food. Right? Production's not the problem. 35% of food is wasted before it reaches the plate. Food is so cheap, we're so good at this, you just get to throw it out. So you're smart enough, you sniff. Kathy saw this right away. She went like this. This is BS, people. Yeah, insert your own superlative, whatever that is for you. I know what yours is. Yes, we have to be careful about how we filter data. And when you know as a human being, as a self-regulating being, that no, this is not right. This does not adhere to natural human principles. Self-regulating economies and ecosystems is just not right. You're usually right. 1.9 billion tons is wasted globally. Guess what? Based on how much we consume a year, that would feed how many people? 2 billion people. Right there is wasted globally. Worse, zero topsoil remains in 33 million acres, 1/3 of our corn belt. Zero. There's a little thing called, well, we're not there yet. My past career, which I still do, is ecological restoration, and so I've got data that says, well, if we calculated what that would cost to restore these soils using traditional measures that Flavia loves, which is called compost, if we were to dish that back in and get the organic matter back in, it would cost $1.1 trillion, and that's just a portion of it. Okay, that's probably an underestimate. That amount of maintenance was not accounted for in the years that this field, that our corn belt was producing. The years we were counting that productivity, we were not accounting for this. It's gross exaggeration of productivity. There's something called productive capacity, which is the capacity of our farms, of our industries, of our economy to produce now and into the future. It has declined. Because now these soils without organic material require more water and more nutrients to maintain this productivity. And that requires fossil fuels. She agrees. Okay, now this is the last thing, because this is such an important point, that we shall not be overcome by bad information. Now, I came across a study in Europe that said this. What is this number? What's 1,500 miles? Food miles. I knew somebody would know. In the United States, this is the average number of miles our food is transported to get to our grocery stores or our houses, 1,500 miles. What is this number? This is the amount of diesel, 6 gallons, that it takes to ship 1 pound of food, 1,500 miles. Okay? Now the study, though, concluded that it was more efficient to have longer supply chains because it was more efficient per mile traveled. It didn't account for the total miles. And they compared it to a regional food economy that on average might be 50 miles. And doing the calculations, a regional food economy consumes less than half of the fuel, diesel fuel, that our traditional global supply chain consumes. So when we think about this interaction of diversity, energy, and trade, and how we can manage these fundamental components to shift something such as fossil fuel consumption or energy consumption, I'm going to get to a more important point next. We really start perhaps recognizing that there's a huge opportunity to make shifts in how we approach carbon, energy neutrality, self-reliance, self-sufficiency, all these great things. By understanding these components, that's the test. Now, Flavia, you guys, thank you so much for hosting me the last couple of nights. I appreciate your place. One of the things we did is we watched this, Energy Horizons. Oh my gosh. Alan, you have such a great radio voice. Really cool. One of the things I really appreciated about this, and we haven't even gotten through it, but the third episode, or whatever it was talking about the real challenges that we have in our renewable energy challenge, our ability to meet our needs with endogenous energy in this state. And there are real challenges, not just technical challenges, but there are social challenges, conflicts. There are conflicts with rare species in Nevada that will be obliterated when we mine lithium, right? These are real challenges. There are threats to indigenous populations that live in areas where we want to generate renewable energy. So I'm really, really proud of you guys for pointing this out. This is difficult. So sometimes technology is not necessarily the answer. And when we start asking different questions, we might ask, well, how might we manage trade to actually allow us to meet our energy goals and our carbon goals, maybe in a way that actually is a little more fruitful. Okay, economic restoration, we're almost done, and I appreciate your patience. Yes, you have 10 fingers.
And you can have 10 minutes.
Okay, thanks. Economic restoration. I spent a little bit of time in this scene. Fortunately, I survived, and one of the things I learned is that these people are standing way too close. Their faces should be melting, or some sort of trick of perspective. But one of them's pointing up there and saying, you just wait. This is a forest fire scene, obviously, and you just wait. When this is out, something amazing is going to happen in this forest. And as ecologists, we call that succession. The slate is wiped fairly clean. It's a catastrophic fire especially. And there's this process of natural recovery because our ecosystems, just like you, they are self-regulating. They are self-regenerative, they repair themselves. And in the early stages, there's almost nothing. And over time, yes, plants start to grow back. This is a succession stage. You can call it the natural restoration stage. And if we suppress disturbance again, over time, the original forest will develop. And if we continue to suppress disturbance, like we have done with wildfire suppression in the United States for a little over a century, actually, you're going to push it way, way far to the right side. So look how similar the early successional stage and the late successional stage is of this. Time going by with no disturbance. But so what? That doesn't matter. What I find interesting is when we look at productivity and diversity on this y-axis, and if we were to draw a, let's see if I can do this. This work? Yeah. Draw a graph. What's happening to productivity and diversity over time? Is it a constant straight line from none to the greatest? Is it down this way? What's going on? You guys have, what's that curve look like? A bell curve? You mean the one-humped camel? He agrees too. Huh. That's pretty good, yeah. This is studies from all over the world too. And people study this stuff. It's kind of fun. I find it interesting. Yes, it's called the intermediate disturbance hypothesis, that peak diversity coincides with peak productivity in these intermediate stages of recovery. Pretty cool, huh? And so I find it interesting, but it gets even more interesting to me, you might be snoring in your mind, when we look at biomass accumulation, right, on this other axis. That is what's happening, not just the annual productivity, but what's happening to the accumulation of leaves, dead leaves, organic matter, roots, trunks. That's a different curve. That's increasing. But, so what? There's a threshold that's crossing you. You see where the red line crosses the green line. At some point, you get a decrease in diversity, the number of individuals. If we suppress disturbance, and we'll talk about what this looks like economically, we have fewer species garnering more resources, okay, fewer individuals. Perhaps an ecological explanation of the wealth gap, where in our economies what we're doing by injecting fossil fuels, in my belief, by using subsidies, corporate bailouts, global trade policies, concentrating resources into fewer individuals, pushing our economies into the far right side of the succession scale, and, right, productivity is flattening out. And we've already seen from the data that's what's happened in this country since the 1970s with global trade policy, energy policy, etc. Again, I can't say that this is true, but it appears to be true, and it's something that we should be thinking about and we should be questioning. Now, this idea of creative destruction in economics from Schumpeter, I love that term, creative destruction, says that when there is disturbance, it favors new entrants, new business entrants into the economy, and those new entrances are those that provide productivity to our economy. And the way that we've set the rules of the game has suppressed those new entrances. So would we ever expect to increase productivity in this economy? Probably not. We haven't been managing it to increase productivity in this economy. Okay, there's an overriding issue here, and that is the simple matter of scale. How many believe that the globe is the right scale for us to manage our economies? We should have one global economy. It's okay to raise your hand.
Yes and no.
Okay. The globe is the right, okay, we should have massive global trade back and forth, et cetera, et cetera. I did not clarify, right? But in ecology, she always has lessons for us. And in restoration, my past career, we found this, that also too small of a scale is not adequate. If we try to restore a prairie or forest on say the scale of 1 acre, and that 1 acre prairie or forest is surrounded by a sea of cement, it's not going to work. The patterns of disturbance, the patterns of diversity, which we'll talk about in Ashland on Monday, they exist at larger scales. We cannot manage a system at such a small scale, such as just Medford, for instance. In the globe, I believe nature teaches us, is also too large of a scale. We have too many different contexts. Remember the context, SEI context, social, environmental, industrial, that create a unique fingerprint in Medford here that's unique, and the globe is full of thousands of unique economic fingerprints around it that cannot be replicated, and they're so different in our values that when we try to manage trade, energy, and diversity across such a wildly different context, might we expect turbulence? It's as if we're shaking up the globe. It's very possible. So, but too small is a little bit different. So here's something that seems to be, that people seem to be gravitating towards across the U.S. that actually adheres to John Wesley Powell. Did you just say John Wesley Powell?
No, I said watersheds.
Watersheds, which is synonymous with John Wesley Powell. The one-armed guy who floated a dory down the Colorado River before there were roads, and came back to the United States and said we should be managing our Western economy not based on traditional square boundaries, but based on watersheds. And where do I live? I live in a square state. So he was not very successful. But yes, it's really hard to change our administrative boundaries. It's very difficult. California's been trying it for decades and decades and decades. Because even California perhaps is too large of an economy, number 5 in the world if it was a nation in terms of GDP. But this is something that perhaps speaks to the natural geography of humans, where we feel strong connections with each other, where we feel we actually have control over our economies, and where we can manage energy, diversity, and trade in a way that requires that we fulfill our needs as human beings to sustain ourselves. So, what do we do here? We set goals. Perhaps, at the very least, maybe 70% of what we consume is produced here. Maybe 20% is in other areas around Oregon or other states. And this is what I set for myself. Maximum of 10% global imports into our households. It's actually easy to do. It's pretty simple. It's kind of fun because we get to support our local businesses. So, has anyone ever thought about this before? Oh, love it. No wonder why I felt so welcome walking in here. Cool, pretty easy, yeah. So watershed economies is an example of a regional economy, but so what? It requires we increase diversity. And more specifically, it requires we increase diversity at the bottom of the pyramid, right? Our extractive industries, agriculture, recycling, renewable energy. This is the foundation of our economies that will keep us afloat over time, regardless of what happens in this turbulent century. Significant carbon, let's not forget, exists in our soils. All that carbon we've lost from the Green Revolution before then, we can pump that back into our soils via regenerative agriculture and other things that provides support for our regional economies, food sovereignty, things of that nature. And this also requires an increase in economic diversity, which has all of those benefits. So an example here, I know that you, like me in northern Colorado, we have struggled through wildfires recently over the years because of how they were managed. But every calamity is an opportunity, and so this is an example from northern Arizona, where the Restoration Forest Products, I get to learn about their operation of thinning their ponderosa pines to a more, call it a natural, maybe, density. They're using that to create biofuels. They get about 6 different products. By creating timber for the local community, they're minimizing 1,500 miles of transport of timber from Canada and other places, which is burning fossil fuels and emitting CO2. It's reducing wildfire intensity in the area that also has a different impact on CO2. But more importantly, this is happening. It's increasing the diversity of the understory that provides fodder for animals such as domestic animals that might go into our local food chain, pollinator species, etc. And it's providing great water benefits. I heard someone mention that earlier. Healthier watersheds for clean water. One act. This requires adding diversity to our economy, which we do not have in Colorado, and so we don't even have the ability. We've lost that industry. It has become extinct nearly in our economy in Colorado, so we can't even do this. It's very difficult. So what do? Because we've done this as a company, my previous company, we cut down trees, we thin it out to a more natural level, we stack it up, and we let it burn. And then that CO2 goes in the atmosphere without producing any economic benefits or food benefits or anything. But won't it cost more? Will it? Okay, we're going to poke fun at this too. What would you say about this economic strategy? If I were to propose this to you, you already know I'm full of it because I asked you to stop breathing and I was wrong. You are self-regulating. So what if I walked into your county and I said, all right, I've got a deal for you. We're going to have a 2% increase in poverty. We're going to have a $4,230 decrease in annual household savings and earnings. Does this sound great? An increase in the amount of low-paying jobs. You ready? Also, an increase in the amount of household assistance that the county will have to pay. This is great. We should do this. And then finally, we're going to decrease annual tax revenues by $83 million per year if there were taxes in Jackson County, based on national data. Doesn't this sound awesome? We should do this.
I think that's what Trump's doing.
That's what someone does every time we shop here. This is the impact of Walmart on communities based on the data that is out there. There's a lot of studies on this. I wish I had read this report before my book, the second edition, because I do write about this. Yes, this is data that's backed up by a lot of studies, and someone who's funnier than I am said this. It says, the ability to buy cheap crap did not make up for the loss of income caused by corporate dominance. Okay? It sounds smart that something like Walmart that provides cheap products was a good thing for our community. Because yes, there are a lot of us who can't afford, and then this is not, trust me, this is not an assault on people who shop at Walmart. Please understand that. But it's intuitive that it's in our best interest to buy cheap products. But in natural systems where there are feedback loops, this is a trap. And counties have bought into this, and they've invited Walmart and other box stores that are in essence destroying our economic well-being as a community. Oops, did we take that picture? Oops. One of the reasons for that has to do with this idea of recirculation value. And nature teaches us this. Recirculates value all the time in nature. That for every $20 we spend at a chain store, $3 stays in your community, 3 out of 20. When you spend $20 at a local store, half of that stays here. But the smart people in the room, which is all of you, are saying this. What happened to the other 10 bucks, right? Why didn't it all stay here? Because a lot of our stores, because the way diversity, energy, and trade are managed, there are pipelines for global products. And so it gets worse than that. My wife, who is an accountant, she used to work for Wild Oats. Anybody remember that store? She was an accountant. She did the accounting for all the Canadian stores. And we lived in Boulder County at the time. So all of that hard-earned cash in Canada went to Boulder to support her high-paying job as an accountant. Wild Oats got bought out by Whole Foods. Whole Foods got consumed by Amazon. Who owns that? Yeah. So who knows where those jobs are now? So a lot of local companies, they hire accountants, they hire local marketing firms, right? Legal firms, etc. Those are high-paying jobs that disappear from your community when we as citizens allow our governance to skirt these natural trade rules and allow something like this to happen. And who do we blame? Please don't blame somebody who shops at Walmart. Blame yourself. Okay? It's our job to keep our governments responsible for these things. Okay, a few economic restoration policies. These are things I love to, I don't know why. I love to kind of pick up from folks around the US, a few places around the world, to find things that, we could say, well, great, restoration sounds awesome. How do we get there? We have 1 more minute. So a few things speeding up is we have great examples of these special districts that allow us as citizen counties to tax ourselves to support something. In this case, it's Science and Cultural Facilities District in Colorado, 7 counties. But you can also do this to form a sustainable economic region that changes the rules of the game in your favor. So it encourages cities and counties to work together to strengthen their economies. Food sovereignty in mind, renewable energy, and all these things. Keep it local codes in Vermont, Act 250, that requires new large commercial projects to meet 10 criteria. There are procurement policies at state and county and local levels that require local products. Tax system shifts, such as Vermont, higher taxes on large corporations. Tariffs. A big part of me cheers Trump a little bit for waging tariffs. I know, if I had said that right away, you would have kicked me out. But I have an article I wrote recently about this that I'm not sure it's going to be managed well. So that's the concern. And if you are an ecologist who's concerned about your economy, you might say this: please, our federal administration, allow our states to apply tariffs at the state level so we can use that money to rebuild our local economies. That will be the ecological answer. The more that we argue and battle against Trump, the less energy that we are focusing on those sorts of solutions. We perhaps should be using this opportunity to shift the discussion, right? That's not my thinking, that's someone else's thinking. That says the more energy we spend battling something, the less energy we are spending to build a system that's better. So, I know that Trump's not going to listen to an ecologist, but maybe he'll listen to someone that can we do something about shifting how we apply tariffs that allows us as states to restore our economies to a more thriving state. Industry fees is something that's also used, because the tariff thing may never happen at state levels, but industry fees allow us as states to actually put a tax on imported wine or timber or steel or whatever, and use that to rebuild some of those industries in our states. So there's a lot of them. I love writing about that. And if Vermont was a country, and following this, it actually is number 2 in the world in terms of its economy. Now, it's not perfect. This is that GDP per capita on a unit energy basis. There's some tricks going on there, and we can go into that later. It's interesting. It doesn't mean that they're perfect, but they do a lot of amazing things as an economy that follows some of the natural trade rules of natural systems. And that's about all I have. That we can go through an economic analysis to identify opportunities in your region. And I do have a few odd asks for you, and this is about it. To consider trade and diversity strategies to reduce energy consumption and to help resolve CO2. Start a local business. There's a lot of creativity and freedom in that, and we need diversity in our economies. Also support a local business. And think about regional scale manufacturing. How do we rescale manufacturing to meet regional needs? No time to talk about that now, but there's a lot of great opportunity that does so in a way that reduces energy consumption. So, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time, and sorry we had a little bit of technical difficulty in the middle there. Well, no, the beginning, sorry, and in the middle. Yeah, some disruptions, some agreements and disagreements coming over the airways, but thanks you guys, I appreciate it.
Thanks very much indeed, John. We are, as John pointed out, we're running a bit late. Kathy has generously said she would like 10 minutes, but she can do it in 7, so we have time for maybe 2 questions. So this is the questioner's mic. Anybody want to ask a question?
There are no stupid questions, just dumb answers.
Okay. Okay, Ray?
So I'm actually wondering about, as a scientist and looking at experiments and what is the response I want and what do I measure, whether we're measuring the right thing or not.
I would love that, yeah.
And as a way of understanding what is happening and all the consequences of that bringing up, I mean, I understand the idea of building from the bottom and biodiversity and all that kind of stuff. But as long as the metric at the top stays the same, I'm not sure how we get that transformation. And the metric today, unfortunately, it's greed, I, me, mine. Right? If I can make more money than you, I really don't care how I do that.
Yes.
And so nothing that we do building at the bottom is going to change that unless we try to change the top. So that we can actually force the change to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, that gets back to how do we form change? And perhaps, we have to look at this from the top down, the federal level down, I was saying. Personal level, or from the personal level up, or something, right? I don't have a perfect answer for that, but I think we have to work at it at all angles. And what I'm getting at here is that when we try to make changes at an unnatural scale, like such the federal government, some believe it's just too large of an institution to manage one economy. We see our most important policies as simply ping pong balls in a match, where whatever executive orders were signed this election are going to be undone in the next election, back and forth. The solutions themselves do not have persistence. And if a sustainable solution does not have persistence, by definition, it is not sustainable. So when we think about the persistence of our goals and our actions, I believe that the more local that we manage those and create those, such as, say, state or regional tariff type solutions to rebuild our economies and our agricultural systems from the bottom up, what I have seen from other states is those solutions tend to have more persistence. They're not at the whim of what's happening federally, politically. And greed, yes, is a natural part of humanity and every species on this planet. It has been for 1.5 billion years on this earth. But what's stoking greed? We have to ask the right questions. And it could be possible that, again, what we see in nature is when you apply a lot of exogenous resources, you transfer resources into the system, few individuals will indeed garner those resources at the expense of others. We see that, and that's why it's important to ask what's driving this, right? It's not greed, but what's manifesting greed to be corrupt, right? Yeah. So it's important questions. I don't have the best answer for you. And it has to come at multiple levels, perhaps, from the top down and from the bottom up. But I believe the most persistent solutions, because it is the natural geography of humans, I think this is the way that life is organized on this planet, is that the more local solutions reflect our needs locally best and maybe are most persistent.
Yeah. So I think we should have a call to action button here, and each of us make a commitment to repurpose something, or support a local business, or cancel their Amazon membership or something.
Nice, I like it. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're running down, so let's give John a round of applause, and Kathy's going to come up.
So we're going to reform to help communities do this, and if you want to be involved, I do have a sign-up sheet back there, and I've got a few books, the first edition. And if you want a new copy of the book too, it is a month late, which isn't bad for the global marketplace. And they're giving 20% off, and I've got a discount code over there if you want to learn more about this. All right, thank you.
I might be doing this from memory here. While Alan tries to bring up the PowerPoint, the focus of this last few minutes is to share with you things that SOCAN is doing and things that other groups are doing that you might be interested in. The action part of SOCAN is very important to us, and so I hope as you've been listening, you're thinking of things that you can do and maybe convince some other people that they can do. One of the things on the back is there's information in a sign-up sheet. We teach a 10-week course called Living with Climate Change Rogue Valley, and it's offered through SOU to students and to community people. So there's information back there. There are little quarter sheets if you're interested in that. We have a few graduates of our Master Climate Protector, which was the precursor of Living with Climate Change. Raise your hand if you were part of that. So these are the people to ask if you're thinking about doing that. Just go down here and let me see what's here. Just let me see that. Yeah.
Just a quick announcement, this is a new development. They've actually wired the front doors from the outside. Everybody will have to exit, and this is, I don't know why, we'll have to figure this out, but everybody will have to leave from the back doors, I imagined. It's very inconvenient for a lot of us that loaded stuff in, so just know that.
Where are the back doors?
It's right out this way, and we'll go out. We can go out as a group if you need to walk around. Okay, I can do this just from here. Our program next month is going to be on our strategic plan, and in the back, there was a lovely slide here to show you. There are some copies of the strategic plan, and Daniel, who's not with us, our executive director, not with us tonight, was instrumental in developing this, and we're going to talk about that and then identify actions to help meet the ideas of that plan. So hope you'll join us next month, and that we always meet on the last Tuesday of the month. Can't even make this little marker go down. Can you make this go down? So I don't know. Sorry. Oh, now it changed. The federal and state project is a group that's working on legislation in Oregon is the focus, and they're looking at bills and offering testimony. If that's of interest to you, if you look at our website, socan.eco, you'll see the federal and state group, and that might be something that you would want to look at. Their next meeting is Monday, March 10th. We also have a regional and local project, and with that we have climate action teams in different communities. There's a climate action team in Ashland that'll meet next on Thursday, March 6th, and it's at the library in Ashland. The Medford Climate Action Team meets on Zoom, and that's March 3rd. And each of these are looking at actions that can be taken in those communities. The talent group meets Tuesday, March 11th, and the focus of that group is on electrification. We also have a coastal climate action team that's out of Brookings, and Grants Pass has a group that are working on different actions. And on the website is a calendar, and so the meetings of all those things are listed on those calendars. Another group we have is called Sustaining Climate Activists. It's a support group for people who are working on climate change issues. That group meets monthly, and the next meeting is Saturday, March 22nd. That's at the Talent Library from 10 to 11:30. And anybody is welcome to join us for those meetings. They just offer an opportunity to support each other, and those are facilitated by people with experience. The education program, we're starting again our Climate in the Classroom. We have a group of volunteers that are looking at how to go forward with that. So if you're interested in helping teachers who want to teach about climate change or who are teaching and would like some more support, that's on the calendar. The meeting actually is this Friday. Event at Bloomsbury Books, which John mentioned. It's the third, Monday the 3rd from 7 to 8 p.m. if you're interested in hearing some more. Then from Southern Oregon Land Conservancy, they have an agate desert preserve, wildflowers, a hiking trip, and the KS Wild group has First Variety art shows, and those are at the office in Ashland. And then Ashland Climate Collaborative has a First Friday bike ride, which will be on March the 7th, 5 to 6 p.m. And a Greater Applegate is having All Things Fire Fair, which is on March 8th, learning more about fire in our area. And let's get that. So the slide you can't see is saying it's time to take action. And so I hope you'll leave here thinking specifically about what you can do. And maybe in the minutes between here and the door, if you go back to that person you started with, sharing ideas about sustainability, and share with them one action that you think you can take. It's by doing things that we're going to make a difference. So, sorry about the technology tonight. Thank you for being here, and thank you very much to John for the presentation. We're really glad you were here with us.